Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another edition of Noles Anonymous. I'm your host, Dave. No, I'm not. I'm Drake.
Yeah, you are.
You can tell we're out of practice. I'm
Keep it
Drake.
going.
I got Dave in here with me in the stream yard. Dave, ¿qué pasa, mi amigo?
Well, I am Ron Burgundy, and I gotta say, anybody listening to this is a sicko because, damn, we have been through it the last 5, 6 weeks. We just can't get I just want a day where we can relax and there be no news, no speculation, not everyone fighting on Twitter. That's like my dream is just a day.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've had a few of those days in the past, I guess, like 2 or 3 days, whether it be, Richie Leonard or Roy Dale Williams, committing today as, we're recording today on January 13th. You also had Earl Little committing, Marvin
Mhm.
Jones Jr. also committing after, we waited a little bit, but Dave, I mean, you're kinda right. I mean, ever since what, December 3rd, it's just been bad news after worse news after disrespectful news. But overall, I mean, Florida State, heading in the right direction. Mike Norvell signed a big fat contract to just basically say, Alabama, you're now Florida State. We'll stay right here, continue building what I have. And quite frankly, I think we have a lot to be excited for heading into 2024.
We do. We have a lot to be excited for roster wise, and we have a lot to be excited about. I think program wise, and they're two completely different conversations. But I'm at the point where I'm starting to wonder if everything's connected. I think I mentioned this to you yesterday, or 2 days ago. Mike Norvell signs this big extension. This is huge news. This is kind of, I mean, some people we know would call it an inflection point, maybe for the program. Making a very decided path of we're gonna make our coach one of the five highest paid coaches in college football. You're making a statement doing that. You're saying this is our guy for the foreseeable future. We're gonna have program stability. We've seen enough from him to know that's where we want to go. And I'm totally good with that. But that tells me something more than that, Drake. If we're gonna pay our coach over $10 million a year, and we're gonna have one of the five highest coaching salaries in the country. Something tells me Florida State knows that there's going to be some new money coming in soon, and that will not be from the ACC. Doesn't make sense to me otherwise. We're behind Rutgers financially every year in terms of our TV payouts, and Vanderbilt and Purdue. And so to make a big money move like that tells me money is on the way, Drake. This ACC illusion won't be here forever.
I don't know why of all three of those schools, you saying that we get paid less than Purdue, I don't know why that one specifically hurt the most. Rutgers, I'm like, Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini. Vanderbilt, Commodores, Jay Cutler. But Purdue,
Yeah, it hurts.
yeah. I mean, but no, I mean, you're right about that, and also it shows you that we have not only the football program kinda, like, moving forward, but also something that Jimbo Fisher wanted,
Mhm.
6 or 7 years ago when he actually did leave, was that he wanted the backing of the administration to look for, like, "Hey, college football is evolving." Now, Jimbo Fisher didn't evolve when it came to his schemes, offensive game planning, him carrying 2 binders on the sideline, but, I mean, now it looks like for the first time, everyone looks good as a unit, as a collective, if you will. Not only you have the administration, you have TV doing the best that, thing they can do around, and you also have Mike Norvell and company. So it looks like basically we know greener pastures are ahead of us, and now it just, leaves to be said whether it be the Big Ten or the SEC, but we won't have that, for a while longer, even though I personally think we might be hearing that news probably before the beginning of this next upcoming season.
Yep, I think it'll be well before then. I think everybody involved wants this over with and behind them. It's going to be great news for Florida State when this ultimately comes to a close. Sooner the better. There's a deadline. I think it's in August, right before the season, to announce if you want to be out by the following season. So if we want to be out of the ACC by 2025, we're on the clock. We got like 7 months here to wrap this up. Think it'll be done. But yeah, I just want to say one more thing before we move on. We could not be what you just said. We could not be in a more diametrically different state as a athletics program than where we are under Alford. This guy is the right person to be leading this ship. He just gets it, and he's
He gets it.
spending on the right things. He is. as integral to what's going on with Florida State football's resurgence as anybody else, and I don't think he gets the credit that he's due for that.
I mean, no, I mean, we had him on the show, what it feels like, I guess 3
Years ago, feels.
on this at this point, I think when he was first announced as the AD, he's coming from by way of Central Michigan, also was with the Dallas Cowboys. He was the one that helped secure funding for the Death Star, aka Jerry World, AT&T Stadium, and having him in the fold there, but also having a organization like TBE be one of the foremost, I guess, strongest and most cohesive collectives out there. Because you hear one of the big things I think Bud Elliott talked about it over at Cover 3, that Alabama doesn't have that strong of a NIL kind of collective or backing because, I mean, let's be real here. If you're a high school kid, you in Alabama, you go there more to play under Nick Saban, be developed by Nick Saban. You will give him the discount. I mean, he's the GOAT. Like, why? I mean, you can't be asking for more. It's like, hey, man, just an 18-year-old kid. I got no, staffs in college, but I'm gonna ask for more money from you even though you're Nick Saban. You're not gonna do that. And
Right.
now with Kalen DeBoer going in there, who I think is a great coach, I think Dave, you brought it up there. I think he has a insanely like really good top 25 record against like the top 25 teams. It's
12
insane.
and 1 career against top 25 teams or something. Or
That's insane. And the one is against Michigan this
right.
past year in the CFP. But if we look at it overall, like I think it's not just one person that's helping FSU move forward towards this new era, this new kind of towards either the Big Ten or the SEC. It's a collection of many different individuals and
Collective,
or
almost, you
yeah,
could say.
or a collective, yeah. But also that's something that if you asked 4 years ago, one of the big things we complained about was that no one was on the same page.
Yeah.
No one was going towards the most common goals to make this program even better. And now, fast forward a few years later, we're right at the forefront of it, baby.
Yeah, this could have gone very differently, guys. Like, I think next we should probably talk about like let's talk about all the good things going on and what we have to look forward to for next season. But yeah, it's we we have taken advantage of NIL at Florida State in a way that I don't think a lot or most people thought was possible. I think there were a lot of fans of Florida State that thought, oh, great, another way for us to fall further behind Bama and Georgia and Texas and all these schools that have unlimited money. It's not been the case. Florida State is as well funded with their NIL program as anyone out there. And you got to credit this coaching staff and this administration for causing something that probably could have held us back to be one of our biggest strengths right now.
No, I completely agree. But now let's turn the page on that and look at towards where you talk about the good news. We have a lot of, races leaving the program, whether it be a Jared Verse, a Trey Benson, or probably the most underrated unsung heroes of Darian Jones, Renardo Green, Kendall from the defense. But also, we have a lot of fresh new faces and not so fresh if you follow them from recruiting with the transfer portal. We have some kids coming in. Marvin Jones Jr., son of former 11 Marvin Jones Sr. You also have Earl Little, who actually is the son of a former Miami Hurricanes great. And also a kid that we recruited heavily heading into LSU game, not in 2023, but 2022, in Jalen Brown. Dave, we currently have 12 kids committed. As of right now, how do you feel with I guess, the kids that we're bringing in through the portal right now through the process?
Okay, so I said we're going to do a positive section, and most of this is positive. If you look down the list, and to be clear, when you said we have 12 kids committed, we're talking about transfers. We have 12 transfers in the fold right now, or 13 with Richie Leonard, I think, right? Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, we have 13 now, and that is less than we have going out. So we're replacing, I think, everyone that left Florida State except for Dennis Briggs, maybe because he hasn't been rated fully yet, was rated 3 stars or less. And so we're replacing guys like that with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, mostly blue chip players.
I think
That's
it's 70. I think it's like a 70% clip of like the transfer four kids are actually are blue chip prospects per 247.
that's right. 9 out of 12 before they throw Leonard in the fold, who hasn't been rated for transfer purposes yet. But that's exactly right. We have gone from a class that was fringe top 10 to now pushing closer towards top 5 territory with the number 3 transfer class in the country. And as usual, a lot of people were freaked out about this. No one was committed besides Mario Jones Jr. or Marvin Jones Jr. And we were wondering what's going to happen with quarterback. Are we going to sign anyone else? I think there was a plan in place, obviously, and that plan has started to come together. Just today, we get a running back that I think made me feel me and a lot of other people feel a lot better about a position that I wondered if it was going to be one of the weaknesses for us. Like you said, Earl Little is one of the most talented defensive backs on our roster from day one. He's one of the most talented defensive backs in the country, I think. And we now have 4 Bama guys committed. Terrence Ferguson should compete right away for a spot on the offensive line, which is a huge deal because that unit regressed last year. You lose Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. What do? You bring in a highly touted Bama transfer, the top JUCO player in the country before this year. Malik Benson at wide receiver. That kid is a burner. Jalen Brown, also from LSU, super talented receiver. So we replaced the talented receivers we're losing with talented receivers. We've brought in 3 players now on the defensive line that are all blue chips. Drake, that is addressing a lot of needs considering how much talent you're losing.
I mean, it really is, and one of my favorite things actually of looking at a majority of these players, not all of them, but a lot of them, most of them have 2+ years of eligibility
Right.
remaining. One of the big things I think we talked about, I guess, off camera, texting back and forth in the group chat, was that we were concerned that high school recruiting hasn't taken that next step alongside, on the field results. And one of the big things was like you can't, rely heavily on the portal. Well, that's kinda like a half truth. You can't, obviously be bringing in, kids on 1 year, 2 year deals every single season, but when you're bringing in players that have 2+ years, I think even one of the kids also has 3 years of eligibility remaining, that kind of puts a not really puts a band-aid over the problem, but it definitely alleviates that concern just quite a bit.
Yeah, for 100%. I mean, it tells me that we're not just trying to go all in for individual years. Like you saw the Rams did that. Like it's obviously different in the NFL versus college football, but you saw the Rams do that a few years back where they just signed everyone and blew the salary cap and screwed their future over. And
They
now
won,
that's
though.
they
It wasn't
won.
hurt.
They did. They won. That should have been what happened with Florida State this year. We will not get into that because I don't have enough time left in the weekend to talk about that. But like you said, we've brought in kids that I think the plan isn't just have them here next year. We'll figure it out again. The less you have to figure out again each offseason, the less variables and uncertainties you're eliminating, just the more stability you're adding to this program. And it's not just like unknowns that are coming in this transfer class to fill in. Again, these are super talented, some of them super productive, known quantities, like you said, that are planning that unless they just have freak years this year, which look, if they do and they leave because of that, I'd say that worked out pretty well. But otherwise, we're going to have, like you said, a lot of these kids for a couple years. And I think it feels like we're ramping up for 2025 to be a
Mhm.
huge monster year, but not as much of a letdown next year as I think people were worrying.
I think the biggest thing was, I think heading into last season, I was of the belief that 2020, this past 2023 year, my goal was always to win the ACC and make the ACC championship game, which was accomplished, which more should have been accomplished. But like you said, we don't have enough time in the day, weekend, month, year to actually,
Right.
alleviate all those concerns or discuss it at all. But 2025 to me was always going to be the year where you have the high tech kids like a Omar Graham, a Blake Nicholson. Those kids are, starting to come up a little bit more. Hakeem Williams, Destin Hill heading in probably their last seasons here. Like where the entire team overall, and Luke Kromahawk will be probably in his second year, which we all think he'll be the QB heading into that season. So to me, this definitely feels like you're gearing up for 2025. It's not very short sighted, which I like. It's more long term planning for the future. And then speaking of long term planning, we heard DJ U's name being circled as the potential QB actually for Florida State as early as I think right after the Louisville game. Even before that. Dave, we've talked about him on here since he was the freshman against Notre Dame, leading Clemson to over them in the ACC championship game.
Yep.
What do you expect from DJ U? But before we get into that, how do you feel about landing him over instead of Cam Ward?
I have no problem with that. I think there was some indications that the staff felt like DJU might have been a better fit for what we're trying to do. And I'm not, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's necessarily better than Cam Ward or anything. But I can tell you that the style of football he plays with and just his size alone, I think is going to help
He's a
him
tank.
stay on the field, which is apparently Drake is the biggest deal in the history of college football. Your starting quarterback staying on the field forever. So just that as an initial matter, but I I expect big things from DJ Drake. I will say this. Clemson obviously has been a dominant program for the better part of a
Decade.
decade now.
Mhm.
And they have absolutely ruined DJU's short-term career for the time he spent there. They did him no favors. They did not coach him up well. You're seeing a lot of frustrations out of Cade Klubnik that make you wonder, was it DJ or was it just that they're not getting the most out of their quarterbacks? I'm not a Clemson fan. I don't research Clemson, but I know that what I saw with my own eyes from DJU's time there versus what he did instantly going over to Oregon State, a team with a hell of a lot less money for their that they run through into their facilities and their support staffs and whatnot. It wouldn't You would expect the quarterback development to be better at Clemson. Wasn't the case. But the fact that he went right away and improved upon a lot of the issues that he had at Clemson, I think that just goes to show you the talent is still there. This kid was one of the highest rated college or quarterback recruits ever. Obviously, the talent is there. He has a huge arm. He's surprisingly mobile for how massive he is. And that kid is not scared to sling the ball down the field. So that's why you bring in a couple kids like Jalen Brown and Malik Benson at receiver to streak down the field and catch deep balls from DJU. I think that is going to work out super well for what Mike Norvell wants to do.
And he already paired them up with, Akeem Williams, who I'm actually super
Right.
excited to see heading into next season. Destin Hill, too. I would not be surprised. Destin Hill is he'll have what? He'll be 3 years removed from college at the end of next season, so he could be draft eligible. I wouldn't be surprised if you hear his name being called at the end of the first round and at the beginning of the second round after next season, because I think Destin Hill has that OBJ kind of quality about him when it comes to actually, handling the ball and actually, route running. That kid's a freak of nature. And with DJU, I mean, I've always said that I think Dabo Swinney, since that Ohio State game where Tony Elliott was unable to call those plays because of COVID, and like, oh, I remember how much I enjoy doing this. I might not be good at it, but I like doing this. And that to me is what Dabo's been doing for the past 2 or 3 seasons. Whereas he is holding and limiting, the entire offensive game planning. I mean, that's what almost got him fired in the first place at Clemson, right? So to me, if Dabo doesn't have a player like a Trevor Lawrence, like a Deshaun Watson, or truly, cream of the crop, A plus generational talents, he struggles. And now you saw with DJ, who is a very good quarterback. I don't know if he's a top 5 or top 10 QB, but I definitely do think he elevates the floor of your program. He wins a lot of games. He will have a boneheaded, interception here or there, but he is a top tier quarterback. But to me, you look at Clemson with Clay Klubnik, who also is struggling.
Yep.
And I fully expect DJU to excel in a Mike Norvell offense with all these weapons around him. And like you said, the kid's like a tank.
Yeah.
He's like 240 pounds, 6'4". You really want to try to bring that down? I mean, you can't. You just simply can't.
Right. Here's what I'll say. I think these comparisons make sense because of like just the size of these guys and kind of what they were able to do. Recent memory here serves me well. And it feels like the floor for DJU here is like an EJ Manuel type season. And it feels to me like I get blasted for this. Feels to me like his ceiling is a 2014 Jameis season. Not 13, not Heisman. That is not what I'm saying. A lot's going to have to go right for that to be the case, but 14 was a little disappointing. There were a lot of close games.
Just because they wear the number 5 doesn't mean you can say that. Just because his nickname is Big Sinkers, you can't be saying that, man. Come on.
2014 season, not 2013 season. He has the arm. That's never been the question with DJU. Can he make the throws? Absolutely. Is he reading the field right? Is he accurate? Those have always been the questions. He improved on those a bit at Oregon State. I'm not saying he's going to jump into being Jameis. I'm saying if every single thing goes right, not 2013, 2014 Jameis. Do you want to give me your own comparisons? How about you do that and stop making me look like an idiot?
Listen, man, I'm not going to be sitting here and comparing him to one of the best college football quarterbacks I ever saw that also got his jersey number retired a few weeks ago. I mean, I'm not going to be that guy. Dave. I'm not gonna be that guy. I'm gonna let you be that guy. I mean, you look at
Floor
him. I mean,
ceiling. Give me
what's up?
floor ceiling.
Floor ceiling, as in you. Okay, so floor for him probably would be hmm, 8-4, a 9-3 kind of year. I think for him, quarterback wise, I'm trying to think of players on top of my head. I really can't. Ceiling wise,
Yeah, what do you think
ACC
his ceiling is?
his ceiling, not trying to get any dead air. I mean, he's got a cannon of an arm. He's very, very mobile. I mean, his ceiling could strongly, honestly, be a Big Ben. A Big Ben. College wise in Miami, Ohio, 11-1 with the conference. Would he be instead of being the MAC, could be ACC conference championship?
I think we would take that, wouldn't we?
I mean, yeah. I mean, also that was his comp out of high school.
Yeah, that's well, I mean, look, if that's the kind of territory, take what I even if it's an EJ season or a Ben season, like those are
What's wrong with the EJ season? I love EJ. Come on now.
it evokes bad memories. I love EJ too, and I think he's one of the very best on the ACC network. I think as a 5-star, I expected the team to be able to accomplish a little bit more. And I'm not saying it was his fault, and it wasn't his fault, but I'm saying I if the floor is an EJ type season, and I do believe that to be DJU's floor with the roster he has around him and the coaching he has, I think we're in great shape. And the last thing I'll say on that point is there was an emphasis here by this coaching staff in what their moves have been with this transfer class. And it feels an awful lot, and with the high school class even, it feels an awful lot to me like the emphasis at the skill positions was speed, 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 which tells me they didn't like what they saw in terms of limitations of the offense in 2023. The limitation was speed. There was nobody you really truly worried about every snap having taken the top off. It was jump balls, it was possessions with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, and those two guys individually were absurdly talented, but it feels an awful lot like the purpose of bringing DJU in with all of this speed around him is just more big plays. And I love the idea of more big plays than we've seen previously.
Pink Cinco with the big plays, folks. You heard it here. Dave,
Yeah.
now where do you want to go now with this?
There's only one place to go, Drake.
There's only one place to go, Dave. Well, Dave, take us there.
All right, I'm gonna put this one on you because if I answer it first, it's gonna sound really mean.
Everything you say sounds mean.
Drake, what is left for this coaching staff to fill out as we round out the transfer class here? And what, in other words, what is currently the limitation of this team heading into 2024 that desperately needs to be resolved?
Let me see. Let me see. I think we're good at running backs. We just
Mhm.
talked about DJU. Corners, I think we're set there. Actually, we add a little bit more of that.
Safety depth, whatever.
Safety depth. I mean, I think Earl Little plays a little bit of safety, so I think we're good there for right now.
Mm.
I would probably say it's gotta be the homie Randy Shannon with the linebacker. The linebackers definitely need to get some more of those, and maybe a little bit of a defensive line, which I like Marvin Jones Jr. I think Grady Kelly's a good spot. He's been a
Yep.
good player. I just think maybe just one more there, but we definitely need to do something with the linebacker spot. Even though I know linebacker nowadays in today's football, college football, it's not the same as 10 years ago. It's you either have an Isaiah Simmons back at Clemson in his heyday who's can go everywhere, or just a guy that plays linebacker. But
Yep.
you definitely need some more of those because I like the future a lot. But Georgia did show you that if you go into next season with this current, roster of players at that position group, it's gonna be taken advantage of.
And Kalen played in that game. Not a ton, but we were gifted in the development, and it wasn't a gift because it was the coaching staff's development. Like Kalen DeLoach developed into one of the best linebackers we've had here in a while. And at the exact same time, Tatum Bethune came in and wasn't just what he was at UCF. He also blossomed into a even better version of himself. The question has not been can the coaching staff develop, and specifically Randy Shannon.
No,
Because
obviously, no, they've been coaching their butts off. They're really damn good at that.
it's not can you develop these kids and can you get the most out of them? The problem is that we haven't been recruiting the linebacker position at an elite level, compounded by the fact that we haven't supplemented it lately through the transfer portal at an elite level or any level. There's no do you see any linebackers in this transfer class? I don't, Drake. Um, that's the problem here. Is the guys right now are really young. Kalen DeLoach took some time to develop. Tatum Bethune was super experienced when he came in, so it didn't require as much time. He had learned a lot of the skills that he required to be the kind of player he was. The kids on the roster, and I do say kids because they're very young right now, that we're looking at going into as starters next year, they very well may, and I expect them to develop, similar to Kalen DeLoach, into great players at Florida State. But if our goal next year is to not see a huge drop off and not have to play bizarre like 4-1 6 defensive schemes all the time, like dime packages as a base defensive package, this has to be fixed. And it has to be fixed through the portal, or you're gonna see a loss next year that you just haven't seen in a few years where it's like, how the hell did that happen? That's my big fear here.
Yeah, I think it's gonna go back to a few years ago where it's like, "Wait, why is the middle of the oh, no," just the entire middle of the field is just being taken advantage of over and over. Here's another slant,
Yep.
10 yards. Here's another slant, 8 yards, and that's something that definitely needs to change, even though it's which is why I think a lot of people were upset with the high school recruiting at that position because there isn't that much out there when it comes to kids in the portal
Right.
that play the position of linebacker. Now, what you could do also is look at the players that you have in the secondary and see that, hey, maybe you play close to the line of scrimmage as a safety spot, or even maybe your speed isn't there yet, but you still have, sort of the acumen, the actual great spatial awareness. You move them to that spot, like Brendan Gann a few years ago, which is someone I wish had stayed here and continued to develop. But it is a cause for concern because that is a position group that we don't expect you to be elite, but you need to be at the bare minimum serviceable,
Competent.
especially
Right.
yeah, serviceable and confident in what you're doing because the way offensive schemes are in today's football, they're going to abuse the literal out of you when it comes to basically if you don't have, that at all, period. I try to find the bun here, Dave. It's been a while, but
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying.
I do. And it wasn't just the crossers across the middle and the little dump offs and the curls. It wasn't just that. Georgia, there was a while there. I did not watch the game live because ESPN was not going to get my viewership. But obviously watched the replay, and it felt like Georgia was like, we're just gonna run up the middle a bunch and like we know you guys know, but like, what are you gonna do? And they just did over and over. And that wasn't the defensive line's fault because defensive line has a job. And if they, get the running back where the linebacker's supposed to key right there and make that tackle at the line of scrimmage and they don't, and they're gonna have to wait till the safety is there to help. That is like the vision of fear I have for next year. Like when we're playing a team like Notre Dame or Clemson who have the talent to keep up with us. Like if the linebackers are getting gashed through the run game up the middle and they're also getting gashed through the air, there's no way to adjust to that. For as good as this coaching staff is at making in-game adjustments and adjustments to how they're using players throughout the season, there's no way to scheme around that. We either address this through the portal this offseason, whether maybe even in the spring, or we're looking at some limitations to this roster next year that are going to be the difference between can you go undefeated versus can you maybe try to win your conference still? That's the difference.
Yeah, and I think basically the expectations, and that's kind of what we'll go off to next, is what do you expect from this team in the 2024 season? And to me, I think it's a little bit different. Obviously, it's not going to be as high as we were heading into last year. But to me, I mean, it's kind of how to ask yourself that question, like as the way the roster is constructed currently. Now, the portal is closed. However, as we all know, there's a second portal that opens up, in the spring. That's where players, you'll see a lot more players like, you know what? I'm not feeling the new coaching staff. I try, give them, the BOTD, but now I'm heading out. You got like Keon Coleman is an example of a player that arrived after spring ball. So then, Dave, heading into next season, I'll pull the schedule in a moment.
Yeah.
What, I guess, would be your expectations for this team as the roster is currently constructed?
Well, look, you're losing a lot. You lost a lot. But you have infused the roster with a level of talent that hasn't been here in several years. So from top to bottom, you're looking at a roster with a much higher blue chip percentage. The next iteration is going to be the very, very top end talent. Like we have a lot of transfers coming in who in high school were 5 stars, which is great because that's still that type of player you're getting on the roster. But that's going to be the next metamorphosis and step forward the next climb for this coaching staff. Um, Setting that aside, though, you made intentional moves this offseason with what you brought in personnel wise to mitigate the drop off. This should not be a scenario where you're having to completely rebuild because of what we've brought in, because of the cachet and the goodwill that the coaching staff has bought with the back to back years that they've had. Um, and the schedule next year, to me, lends itself fairly well to not having a huge drop off. Like, if the question is what's the minimum acceptable outcome, it feels like I hate to say this, but it feels like 9-3 is the minimum that would be acceptable. And I feel like for a lot of people, that's going to sound awfully low. You're coming off back to back 10-win seasons. You went 9-3, you played for the ACC title and maybe won it, and then won your bowl game. You'd still have an 11-win team. That would, given what you lost, I think that would still be good enough for me to think to myself, all right, the coaching staff, look, this was going to be the in between year. We thought 25 was the year. But the ceiling to me is still it's still similar. Like you could still win games next year a lot very similar to the way you won them this year. A lot of close games, a lot of games that could go either way. We're gonna have a great experienced special teams unit next year. That could make all the difference in those type of games. So yeah, the 13-0 with an ACC title still in play. The ACC's weak. Still got to beat Notre Dame, but a floor of 9-3 and a ceiling of a similar year to this year, that feels right. And it also feels like we're in a really good spot if that's the case.
How close, though, is the margin from a team that does,
Mm.
go 13-0 and wins the conference from the same team going 9-3 or even 8-4 heading into next season? How close is that margin? How small is that margin?
It's razor thin. Like if you play Boston College and Castellanos goes crazy and you don't start off with a several touchdown lead, that's a game you could lose. I'm not saying you will. I'm not saying you should, but it's
And
games.
Trayshawn Ward could rush for 100 yards for them because remember, now he's over at Boston College.
That is exactly right. I mean, if you play with fire like that, it's there's a lot of randomness that goes into those one possession games. Like you throw a perfect pass to your receiver who's in perfect position to catch it and run after the catch for a touchdown, except it goes through his hands for some reason and it goes right into the defensive back's hands. And instead of you getting 7, they get 7. Like things
Not
like
even that part. It's even just a simple drop. That
right.
we saw a few of those words like the focus wasn't there on certain for certain pass catchers.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the whole point though, is like differences like that. You have a lot of speed coming at the receiver position, for example, but you don't have a ton. You don't have a ton of like on field production. Like it's not like for example, it's not like Neighbors is coming in who has posted these massive numbers. These are incredibly talented receivers coming in. Still got to produce on the field. So we're still learning things. There's still going to be some learning going on next year about what players are and what they can be and what they can learn while they're here. And I think those growing pains, you're going to lose a game because of that, probably to one of the more talented teams on the schedule. But razor thin to answer your question, right?
I personally definitely do agree with that. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of new faces. I mean, the offensive line. I mean, who you mainly lose a Dimitri Emmanuel, who I think was here for 2 seasons. I think he had a 6 year last year. You have a player, Casey Rock, also leaving. Those two of your starters right there. You do, keep Jeremiah Byers, who we hope is going to take the next step forward. Because, like I've always said, I think offensive line is one of the more difficult positions to play because it's like, basically learning a entirely different language. And then you also have a player like a Terrence Ferguson who is a top tier lineman. However, he's gonna have to learn a new this is a new scheme, and you want to see players take that next step, whether it be a Jalen Early or Julian Armella, and see where they are at in their own development. And to me, this will be the year where we'll see with Atkins, because we saw last year I don't know if regression is the right term, but it just felt like they were very middle of the road. They didn't take a step forward. They may have taken maybe like a little baby step back, but they definitely didn't move forward. So we need to see from Alex Atkins, like, hey, are you going to be able to actually develop, this vision group for the long term, which I think it can, but we kind of need to show him to showcase that. And with this team overall, you look at the schedule, you have games away against Notre Dame, against SMU, which SMU low key is actually going to be a very, very fun game to watch. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
that's
Red Lashley is a really good player. I think that the offense is always buzzing. You have Miami at Miami, which Miami's defense is gonna be taking no step forward. That's a very good defense. Now, who's gonna be their quarterback? I don't think even they know at this point.
Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff. But you also play Clemson at home. You play, Cal, very bad Cal team at home. You play Florida at home
North Carolina without Drake May.
without Drake May, but they do have Malik Murphy, which will be interesting to see how he, develops under Manny Diaz. And then you also have you play. I just had them back on my screen. Duke.
Yeah.
So to
Without
me,
Riley Leonard, there's a lot of interesting
oh,
games on the schedule that, like, on paper should be probably like closer than they might end up being. But there's threats up and down. There's threats on the schedule. I love this. I love the way the schedule sets up. I still think it's a lot easier than it could have been. Still think it lends itself to meeting our ceiling rather than our floor next year. But would you agree with this? We're now at a place where competing for an ACC title is the expected floor in 2024.
I definitely think that you should at least like, have your name in the conversation heading into November. Yeah, I agree.
That is, just think about where we were a few years ago. Like, we went from not making a bowl game to, undefeated this year. I don't even know what you're talking about that we played a bowl game. To having to replace like a third of the roster, and still your expectation for the floor of the team is that they should be competing for a conference title. This coaching staff has done an incredible job in the way they're constructing the roster to do what they want to do. The way, obviously, their adjustments in game on game days, and the way they're developing these kids in practice. It's a hell of a trifecta they got going right now. I still think the best is definitely yet to come with this staff. I think you infuse even more talent into this roster. Watch out. But with what they have right now, which I think probably should be like top 15-ish in terms of composite roster talent in the country by the time this transfer portal class shakes out. Top 15, and I think you're gonna end up being a better than 15th ranked team next year, which means this staff is still punching above their weight class, and that is absolutely all we could ask for.
I mean, this is the only football program currently with both a top 10 high school class and a top 10 transfer portal class actually heading in as of today's date. And I mean, Dave, is there anything else we want to talk about before we head out of here? Or is that just basically a nice way to put a bow on it was right then and there?
Very nice way to put a bow on it. I hope the NCAA and the ACC and ESPN all burn just in a spectacular fire all at the same time, all at once. That's what I hope.
Figuratively, folks. But Dave, it's always great, sitting here talking to you about Florida State football. Please let the folks know where they can follow us, support us, and also support the program.
Oh, it has been a while, but you can find us on YouTube, Noles Anonymous. Please do like this video, subscribe to our channel, ding the little bell at the top, turn your notifications on. When we do release episodes, you will be the first to find out. That great situation for you. But we do thank you, as always, for being here. We don't know why you're listening to us, but we do appreciate it.
And for Dave, this was Drake. So you got it right this time. And we'll see y'all next time on Noles Anonymous. Take care, everybody.
I'm Drake.
I'm Drake.